There we go. There we go. Okay, so today we're joined by colleagues at TNL Community Fund, who will be leading on the second module of this journey, which will be focused on how to use a variety of participation methods to reach young voices. But just before we start, I just wanted to share with you a quick overview of today's agenda. So we will have a very quick and brief icebreaker just to see who's in the room through Mentimeter. I will then be handing over to Joanne Rich from TNL Community Fund for the presentation, which is based on their experience within their foundation. We are also joined by two youth representatives here, Rachel and Tilly, and of course, Joe will introduce them a bit more later. And then the colleagues will essentially wrap up with some key recommendation, and we have some time towards the end with the Q&A section. So please save your questions towards the end or put them in the chat as we go, and we'll come back to it for this part of the section. So I will be sharing a little bit of information now. So before I send the Mentimeter to you all, I wanted to share with you all that the site on the Philea website, where we essentially share the recordings of the modules throughout this journey, the key recommendations and any sort of material and resources that come out of this journey, is now live on the Philea website. So I will put it soon in the chat. It's great, and I will post the link. And essentially, this is where we'll be uploading all the information as we go along. And there you can actually already find the module 1 of this learning series, which was hosted or led by colleagues at the Kalusta Gulbenkian Foundation on how to build a youth advisory board. So I'll be sharing this link soon, but it's a really great resource as we go along. But without further ado, I will share the Mentimeter here. So if you can all go to this link, either go to menti.com and enter this code that's on the screen, or you can just scan the QR code and you should be able to enter. So I will allow you a minute to do so before I share the Menti as well. Okay. If everyone's ready, I'll give you a minute because it's quite a long code. Okay, I will now go and share my screen here. So there we go. So did you attend module 1 on how to develop a youth advisory board? I see we have quite a few colleagues that haven't joined the previous one. Good to have some new faces as well. Okay, I think that everyone has answered the question. And then what type of organization are you representing? So we have 4 options on the screen. Quite a few foundations, philanthropy infrastructure organization, NGO. Okay. We're quite a mix, I see. Lovely. And then where is your organization based? Just the country in which your organization is based, if you would like to share that. UK, Belgium, Hungary, Italy, Luxembourg, some Belgium, Germany. Okay. It's a good mix. And does your organization work with children and or youth? And we have 3 answers. Yes, actively, yes, but rarely, or no, but I want to learn how to. Okay. Well, it seems that we have quite a few that are doing so actively. That's lovely to hear. And that was the end. It's a very short Mentimeter. Okay, now we know who's in the room. Thank you everyone for joining in on that. So I will now be handing over to Joanne from TNL Community Fund for the presentation. So Joe, please, over to you.
Hello everyone, lovely to be here today. My name's Jo Rich and I'm the Head of Youth Voice at the National Lottery Community Fund, and I'm here today to run the workshop, and I have two wonderful youth voice reps with me, Tilly, if you give a wave, and Rachel, who are going to join us later to share their experiences of the journey at the National Lottery Community Fund. So I am going to attempt to share my presentation. Share sound. And from beginning. Oh, huge apologies. Sorry, just go back. Hopefully you can see the beginning page. So the National Lottery Community Fund, I thought it'd be really helpful to give you some context of who we are and how we fund. So the National Lottery Community Fund is funded through all the tickets that are sold through the lottery in the UK. We give out over £700 million a year. So we're a large funder. We're actually the largest funder of community activity in the UK, and all of our funding goes across all communities. We've recently renewed our strategy, which I'll talk about a bit in a moment, but to date it's been a generalist funder across all communities, and large amounts of that go to children and young people. In fact, a third of our funding goes to children and young people, which has amounted to 1.2 billion in the past 5 years. So lots of funding going out across the UK in this field. And that's why back in 2020, they decided to apply for my role to be focused internally within the organisation, as well as externally through how we see our funding going out. So they brought my role in as Head of Youth Voice back in 2020, and it was really to understand how we can hear directly from young people, but also how can we ensure we're giving better quality grant making out through all of that funding that we're giving. So it had a very internal focus as well as an external focus. My kind of past experiences, and this is kind of really hopefully relevant to those in the room, because I'm probably a bit of an anomaly in the funding world. I'm not traditionally a funder. I've spent over 20 years in participation across different sectors, so across the voluntary sector, across local authorities in the UK, more recently the housing association. It was a large housing association, and then I brought all those experiences here to the National Lottery Community Fund, and the idea being that it was very much about how can we use different methods of involving, and also all those incredible partnerships that had been built up over those years, how could they be relevant to our funding as well. So I never had funding attached directly to me. It is about a culture shift within the organisation, and that's probably quite key, because I think a lot of people will be working differently. But equally, it was a bit of both, because obviously everything that we were doing in the participation range was directly with the funding, but I didn't have funding directly to influence in the first instance. So as I say, I bring different experiences from different sectors, and one of my favourite models, and I'll return to it later, which I hope some of you are aware of, is the Lundy model, as this model is used across countries worldwide in national participation strategies, and was developed by Laura Lundy, who resonates in Belfast. And I think this is a really nice, simple model, and kind of a first point of top tip for anyone starting on their journey, as a good one to look at. And I've put later on linked to resources, because this is, if you can get this right, it is understood by not only staff within your organisation, but also young people themselves. A lot of the materials have been developed. And the whole premise of this is that you need to create kind of safe and trusted spaces to enable the voice of young people, but also you need the audience and the platforms in order to influence. So in order to make sure that change happens as a result of what young people say. So I thought that was just a nice kind of starting point and a nice first top tip in case you hadn't come across the model. Just checking in everyone's able to hear me okay, because we don't usually. Lovely, thanks Alice. So moving on to our strategy and linking it with the Lundy model, the whole point of the Lundy model is it's a rights-based model, and many of you will know that the Article 12 of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child states clearly that children and young people have the right to say what they think should happen when adults are making decisions that affect them and have their opinions taken into account. So this is something that I think is really important for us all to remind ourselves of. This is a must to happen, a should to happen, not a nice to have. And where possible, if I'll talk later, one of my recommendations is about getting buy-in from leadership. And this is one of the key things to start with, I think, that it is a UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. However, through all this work that I've done and in this organisation that I'm working in at the moment, I truly believe young people also bring like incredible wealth of knowledge. So they bring diversity because they represent all the communities that we're aiming to reach. They also bring diversity of thought to our processes. So they come up with these incredible solutions and suggestions that we would never think of when we're a bit more, I like to say, experienced than old, because then we know that we've got just a few more years experience, but it doesn't mean that everything's right, because we just, we definitely do things based on our organisations rather than what's right to do sometimes. They also bring lived experience of a range of issues that we are trying to solve, for example, mental health or low employment. So they have lived experience of these issues. They know how to get young people through the door. So to involve them through the grant making, make sure that it's better quality grant making. They're also obviously the future generation of applicants and staff and leaders. But so they need to be a part of shaping that future. But I always want to point out they are also here and now and also bring incredible wealth to whatever you're doing, and a reason why you can be better at grant making. And I know you all know this because you're in the room for a reason. But I think, again, one of my recommendations is about buy-in. And I think sometimes it's important to state the obvious to those that probably haven't had those light bulb moments of participation. So what we did here at the National Lottery Community Fund was obviously reach out to different stakeholders across the business to understand what is the best use of kind of the young people's time within the business and what could have the most impact. Across the work that I've done, and I hope this is a model which is really helpful for everyone on the call, because this is a model I've used again across the sectors. It's not a model as such, it's something I've kind of made up. It's the participation pyramid, and it's something I think is really important for us all to like reflect on, because we understand that when we have young people involved with our grant making, they're representative of the millions out there. They don't have to represent every view. And a lot of the young people I've worked with have often felt that they need to represent all views. And what's important to kind of build into any grant making is ways to hear in other ways. And this is something that I think anyone can do, as in you don't have to have a designated participation worker, because sometimes it's about thinking, who are the experts doing some of this work in the field already? So who can you partner with who's doing incredible peer research already, or who's doing some great stuff around mental health? It doesn't mean that you have to reinvent the wheel internally, because that is still hearing from young people and working alongside young people. So that's the partners, the middle tier. And then the final tier is the collective youth voice. And this again is something that is really important to kind of make clear that a lot of the time, if we're trying to understand what the needs of young people are, there's surveys already out there. This is already happening, and I'm sure in each and every country that we have on the call, there's some incredible organisations doing survey work that can be implemented into your own work to identify priorities or where funding should go. So it's another way of hearing youth voice if you can't do participation directly. But obviously, what I'm here to tell you today is how we do that top tier, the most important tier, which is obviously involving young people directly. So moving on, this is the wonderful bunch that brings a smile to my face every time I see this photo. I love it. It's actually one of the only times that we all got together, because a lot of my work has been over the last 4 years, which, as you know, half of that's been in COVID. We're also UK-wide, which has meant that we're not a place-based funder in this sense in the work. So it means it's really hard to get us all together across all the different countries. But this day was fantastic because it got all the different youth voice teams together. So to date, we've had 35 different young people involved in different ways across our funding. We've involved them in different ways, which I'm going to go on to explain a bit about in a moment. But I thought it'd be really helpful to talk through the process of how we got them involved, so you've got some practicalities as well. So we had the YPIL team back in 2020. So that's young people in the lead. They named themselves. And Rachel, who's going to talk in a moment, was from that team. They worked with us for 18 months. And they had quite an external focus to their work, which Rachel's obviously going to share in a bit about in a moment. And they did a lot to do with events and improving quality grant making around youth voice. So it's more about the ripple effect of influencing others. Their success led to us then recruiting young people in each of the countries. So in Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. And that's the wider group that you see here. And they all took a different angle on the work that they did. It was all based upon their interests and their skills, and we set the action plan with them. So just going back, I'll talk through what that involved. So they were recruited from either funded projects, so it was through funded projects that obviously we'd funded, but some of it was through our networks as well, so bringing in that partnership working. They were all selected through team days, so rather than one-to-one kind of interviews and things, we did team days because it was important that they worked as a team. They were inducted into a high level of our processes, because we are a large organisation, so it's hard to get our head around, and it's hard to get around funding and how that works. So they were inducted into that. They also all received training, different types of training. Again, both Tilly and Rachel are going to touch on that in a bit. They were all either supported by myself, or we were lucky to have a mentor attached to them through the work as well. And then they were remunerated with money through payment, and also celebrated. So we always put on a celebration event. And it's really important to work through those stages, I think, because, and you'll see at the end, there's some top tips given by the young people, and it covers all of those points about training, remuneration, celebration, and feedback. So there's the different teams. And then I'm going to go on now to tell you a bit about how they worked. Because today was talking about the different methods, so different ways that we got them involved. So as I say, each team had a very different journey, and it was all based on what they decided as a team to focus on. But this is giving you the high-level overview of the different types of different methods. So that top kind of flow chart shows the journey of the grant making. So I'm hoping I was trying to do something quite generic that would hopefully resemble some of your work as well. So there's obviously the application process to applying to grants. There's the assessments or the questioning of the grant recipients. There's staff knowledge, full stop. So how do you improve staff knowledge? Then there's the decision-making panel, so where funding decisions are made. And then the wider governance. For us, this is another tier of work, because we're so large, and I'm sure all of you also have trustee boards and that's what I'm referring to in the governance piece. The flowchart, the next line shows the different methods of how we involve the young people in those stages. So, for example, we implemented a peer-to-peer research training, and in the Mind Our Future, and also another program called I Will. So Tilly's going to talk to that in a bit, because that was her group that did the peer-to-peer research. With regards to the assessments, we did some co-creation about how, like the co-creation of questions to ask, grant recipients. So young people were involved with creating the questions, and they were also involved with things like co-designing the criteria for the fund, and also things like detail, like asking for films, like we hadn't traditionally asked for films before, and things like that. So that was all the co-creation piece. The next bit was especially Rachel's team, the team that Rachel was part of, developed lots of training sessions for staff, because we have over 400 staff that are looking at grants. I can't possibly create the opportunities that they meet with each and every individual young person. So the way that we could reach wider was through training sessions. So they've developed a portfolio of different things, and they are on YouTube. So again, I can share the link to these after the session. About what does quality youth voice look like. The next one is the panels themselves, so where decision making happens. So I'm sure all of you have done this or aim to do this, to have young people actually in the decision making panels. So we've done that, and again, Rachel's going to talk to that. And finally, we had young people represented in our governance. So that was on our trustee board and our committees. So hopefully the bottom tier is examples. And again, what I think might be helpful following this is that I put links to each of these as examples afterwards, because all of them have got blogs or YouTube videos attached, and it just brings it to life further. But hopefully that gives you a good overview. So the influence and impact today, again, these are some numbers thrown on a page, but I think what is really interesting is the next page of our learning. But I just thought it's really helpful to reflect back on what our original aims were, and then how we achieved those. So, we're really keen to help and advise other funders, and we've done that a lot in the UK, and this hopefully will be adding to our numbers today, in the fact that you've been influenced to start or take on your journey in Youth Voice. We've reached over 3,000 stakeholders externally. And again, we had, not that there's anything positive about COVID, but one positive thing was the online training workshops that were well attended. So for example, we had over 700 attend one of the the Youth Voice team's workshops, which obviously reaches more and more people. We've designed, they've designed over £50 million worth of new funding. So again, I know these sound large numbers, but it's just the fact that there has been new funding created as a result of them being involved, which is brilliant. They've done the external and internal events, which I've mentioned before. And we also have reactive funding. So that means, organisations can apply to us for anything at any point. And we have had over 12,000 that are specifically mentioning Youth Voice now, which is really great, which means that we're spreading the power of involving young people into where the funding goes. And finally, the new strategy, which I mentioned earlier. So we now have a 2030 strategy. The young people were involved with this. In fact, on the day that photo was taken, this was created. And this, along with different analysis of the work that they've done, has fed into some of the funding that's going to go forwards, and the change in our funding, which is towards 2030. The really exciting piece around this is that we now have a whole mission on children and young people, which we didn't have before. So before, we were a generalist funder for all communities. And now we have 4 missions. One of them is children and young people, one of them is health, one of them is environment, and one of them is bringing people together. So something we're really proud of is that obviously the the point that has come across of how focused our funding needs to be on children and young people. So what have we learned? We've learnt a lot. We've got 4 years worth. This does not cover it at all, and I'm hoping some of the questioning at the end will really bring it out, to quiz further what the learnings have been. But I think things that we're proud of are the variety of ways we've involved young people, which is brilliant. They've all had positive journeys, and hopefully there will be testament to that in what Rachel and Tilly say in a bit, improved confidence, etc. We have led and influenced others. These are all things, though, just to know, are really hard to measure. And this is like one of the weaknesses in the areas to learn from is, how do you measure all this? Because you're relying on third parties to tell you, like the staff members, like grant recipients, the change it is meant for them. And that's really hard to capture when we're talking about the volumes here at the lottery. But we are mentioning, it's mentioned in the new strategy, and participation is mentioned in the new strategy. So it's really, we're really proud of all of that. The weaknesses, though, is that it has been a central resource to date. So it's just myself leading this work. And it has meant that what's come out in our review is that it's not entirely embedded or consistent across the organisation. So what we're working towards now is how we embed it within the portfolio. So that means within the countries. So within teams, how do we embed the skills and the knowledge better? So we've had training, but how do we really embed that and confidence in staff, so as they're doing it, rather than relying on, for example, coming to me for advice. So that's a big learning of how you embed. Another one is our governance roles have been really tricky because, as we all know, trustee, board, committee spaces are not inclusive spaces, even for most adults, let alone young people. The times that they hold on in, our office hours, the paperwork is huge, and the language used in meetings and the format of the meetings are just not inclusive. So that has been tricky, and something that we're looking to work with a partner on who specialises in making those spaces more inclusive. Remuneration, I'm not sure if it's come up before, but this is always something that separates and divides, and there's never one answer for all. So the paying of young people is, we're changing our processes because we recognise it hasn't worked in the best way to date. So that means I need more buy-in from everyone internally because it involves different teams, etc. So that is something we're trying to tackle. And finally, and this is really not the most important, they're all important, but measuring impact is huge. And that's why I come to networks like this to kind of get more and more advice on how we can measure impact better. So I can measure impact in the young people, I can measure impact in some of the changes within our organisation. But for me, what is the real exciting piece around this is the culture shift that you get in organisations and how you might measure that, because it's over a longer period of time, so it's tricky. So the recommendations are time, resource, and buy-in. And this is my last one before I pass over. So what next for us, and I've touched on this a bit, is obviously the great opening of doors that the strategy gives us with the new mission focus. So that's led to me working with each of the different new funding bids to make sure this learning is embedded. To make sure training is mandatory. So again, it kind of is linked to embedding, but how do we ensure more staff are knowledgeable and understanding the impact of this work and the necessity for it? We have an incredible alumni of young people, 2 of which are here today. How can we involve them in future ways of working, as well as partners? And finally, the impact piece. I'm going to leave it there because I am sure you would much rather be hearing from our wonderful Youth Voice teams. So I'm going to invite Rachel first, if that's okay, because she was part of the original team, and I've got a lot of comfort from having them both here because I've worked with them for many years now. But Rachel was part of the original YPIL and is going to share her journey with us. So Rachel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel. And as Joe said, I was part of the original YPIL team back in 2020. So today I'm just going to describe my youth work journey and kind of everything I've done up to date. So I actually started my youth work journey way back in 2017 as a member of Head Start, and Head Start was a lottery funded project. It was all about creating mental health resources, better mental health training for schools, youth clubs, just kind of all the places where young people would frequent. I actually started as a peer mentor and then moved on to become a youth panelist. So I kind of worked with the mayor, all the youth zones across Newham, just to kind of create better mental health resources for all these kind of places across the borough. And in 2020, I was encouraged to apply for the young people in the lead position, and I got it. And then in February of 2020, the YPIL team all met in Birmingham, in the Beat Freaks office, who we were partnered with back then, and we all kind of had a day to kind of outline our goals, our missions, kind of what we want out of this experience, like for the coming like months or year that we were working together. So on that day, we kind of created like a timeline or a mind map of just kind of the things that we wanted out of this project. And the main thing that came out of it is that we just want young people to be at the forefront of everything that we do. We want to provide better like resources for young people across the country. We want to be kind of a spokesperson for their voices, not kind of talk over them, but talk for them, if that makes sense. So we kind of just outlined that we wanted just a better future for young people, just in general. And yeah, on that day, we all kind of outlined our passions as well. So everybody in the team had their own individual passions, things that they wanted to come out of this kind of project. So me, for example, I had a big passion in youth employment and obviously mental health. So I made sure that I put forward some ideas about like how can we improve mental health kind of nationally. So again, that was some of the amazing things that we did on that day. And then obviously lockdown happened, so we moved to kind of doing work remotely. So we had kind of regular meetings where we would catch up with each other. I think that was the nice thing about YPIL. We kind of treated each other like not just a work team, but we were all friends. Like we were all like very close with each other, which was nice. So we had our regular catch-ups, and then we kind of outlined, okay, this is what we want to do, this is what we've done so far, and this is where we want to do, this is what we want to do going forward. So for example, myself and another member of the team called Lauren, we were both very interested in providing better mental health for young people across the country. So one thing that we planned and organized to do was have kind of an event day, outlining to organizations and stakeholders kind of what they can do to provide better mental health resources for young people. And it was a very successful event. Loads of people showed up for it, and we delivered a presentation about how we can provide better mental health training for stakeholders and staff, but also for fellow young people. And I would say it was a success. Um, During the time in YPIL as well, we also had quite a social media movement. So we worked with comms as well to write our blog posts and create social media content. We developed a hashtag called YPIL Done It, just to kind of solidify our, our mission of having young people at the forefront of all of our actions and all of our goals. So that was also some of the fun things that we did. And then sorry, if you just give me a moment. So recently, I was asked to join the Million Hours Fund as well, which was a decision panel, kind of deciding on grant funding for young people projects like all over the country. So hundreds of applications came in, applying for grant funding for their young people projects. They could be anything from like sports to arts to youth zones to kind of anything. And as a young person, I sat on the panel to kind of provide my perspective and experience, kind of to input a different perspective that everybody else on the team might not have had, as a more experienced person. Um, but it was a very, very fun experience. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely felt like as a young person, most of us don't have those kind of opportunities to be able to directly make those kind of changes, to make those kind of decisions. And it was a little intimidating at first, but to be honest, I had an amazing experience, and it definitely taught me a few things about confidence, about being in a room full of decision makers, not being afraid to kind of speak up and put your own perspective there. And honestly, that's the kind of message that I want to send out to young people. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that I've done in YPIL. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me.
Amazing, Rachel. Thank you so much. That was a great overview, very clear. Thanks. Wonderful. And now we have Tilly. I can't see you, Tilly, but I know you're there.
Hello.
Brilliant. And Tilly's from our Wales Youth Voice team and helped develop our Mind Our Future Fund.
Yeah, so I'm Tilly. I was first involved a week before COVID got announced. That was my phone call. And then my first meeting was about 3 weeks after lockdown was announced. So it was my first ever Zoom ever. So in our first Zoom session, they said to us, there's £10 million on a blank piece of paper. We want you to create something to help people. And that was why I wanted to be involved, is because I wanted to help people. I was in a project that was funded by the National Lottery. And they said, Till, you'd be really good at this because I've always wanted to help people. So that was sort of so I applied and then I got in. So while we had this blank piece of paper, we worked with Pro Cymru to sort of develop our skills to understand how to make a criteria, what we actually wanted to fund, who we wanted to fund. Everything was questioned. So our first thing was to create a survey. So it was qualitative and quantitative. I will never forget those words because we drilled into us all the time. And it was really important that our group, we were so different. There wasn't the same person. And it was really interesting while we were coming up with the questions, what sort of questions we wanted to ask. That once we went to go ask people them, when we come in, we had so many different answers, which I'll come on to later, made the next bit quite difficult. However, when we were questioning and trying to get the information that we wanted from our people, we wanted to know what would help our communities best. And we felt really passionate that everyone that we asked, we wanted to help. And while this was all online, we did group sessions and we did individual sessions. So on to our next bit. Once we had all the data collected, we spent hours going through what our focus wanted to be. And even though the answers are so different, we felt there was a main mental health sort of word that we could put into. So in the end, and Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this was about 3 years ago, it was someone to talk to, which we found was really interesting. The young people didn't want counselling or therapy, they just wanted someone to speak to. Mental health, and then the final one was
Well, you wanted to change systems, so you weren't just looking at projects, you were wanting to shift, the whole dynamics of the communities kind of thing.
So once we finalized all of that, we set out to do the criteria. And what was really important to us, that as we all came from different backgrounds, we could all help each other. And we thought, why can't organizations do that? And it was really important for us that organizations joined together to help and sort of support each other. So, for example, there was an organization that was really good at reaching and getting young people, but wasn't strong at say all the questioning. So there was an organization that was good at all the questions, so they would join up and create a team to help those young people. And that was quite different, and I'd never seen anything like that before, because a lot of companies who do the same thing are against each other, and we thought there's two strands there, you can come together. So that was sort of important to us while the criteria was being built. So once that was sort of done and go through the procedure, we wrote a sort of film that I think is still on the website for you to find out about Mind Our Future. And while we were creating the film, we realised I don't think we had a name at that point, did we? So then we had to create the name, and that was quite important to us because we didn't want to just say help us or we can help, but it was something, Mind Our Future, which was quite, it's kind of like Mind the Gap, and it was just something we'd like love to do. And we did that all on line with the photos and stuff, and it was such an interactive stuff through COVID. So once we had our name, we had our video, it got published, and that's when loads of organizations could apply. And then once it was all applied, we all came together in one room finally to then select the 9 or 10 organizations that we would grant the money to. So through that amazing process of Mind Our Future, there were other stuff that I got involved in. So I received training about social media, presentation, and research, obviously through the whole process. But then I had the opportunity to go on to panels to interview people to come onto our panel, but also to work full-time at the National Lottery. And every time they would mention Mind Our Future, I would get a bit excited. So it shows, and it also showed me before I did any interviews, that your research before an interview was so important, and those questions behind it. And I learned so much from them, which was really interesting. Still to this day, we go to the Welsh panel. So through the process, with the governance, we really wanted to say in Mind Our Future, we felt that we did all this work, we wanted to be the ones to decide who's getting the money and who's not. And I felt that was a massive culture change in the National Lottery at that point. And I remember saying we had a meeting, and it was all the Welsh panel, it was all of us, and there was a few extras. And I said, but everyone's got mental health, good or bad. And I think a lot of people went, oh, yeah, she is right there. And that's sort of like those steps that to come then. And it is about your confidence. And I feel like we've been supported so much through it. We were never pushed too deeply. And I think that was my journey. Oh, and I have gone to visit the projects since giving them the money, which has been phenomenal, coming from a blank piece of paper to these amazing projects now, which is phenomenal. So yeah, that's my story.
Oh, it's amazing. But my dog is also joining in with how amazing it is. I'm really sorry. I'll just wait for her to come down. Sorry, someone's at the door. Thank you so much, Tilly. That was incredible. And Rachel, thank you so much. I've just loved having you. We haven't actually worked together for a few months, all of us, so it's so nice to have us all back in the room. So thank you. Oh, sorry. This is really bad timing. I might have to just go. I'm really sorry to share the slides. Alice, would you mind sharing the top tips, which was the next two slides? Because
Yes.
and even Rachel, if you're up for it, you could talk through it really quick, because it's the ones that the young people in the lead came up with. Huge apologies. Oh, it might have calmed down now. Sorry.
Do you want me to share it, Jo?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Let's go. Huge apologies, everyone. Sorry. It's nothing like live. Can everyone see? Yeah, oh, awesome. So these, I'm going to leave you with these. Don't worry about reading it fast, because obviously I'll pass all this on to Alice. But these were the 5 ways to be that Rachel and her team came up with around top tips for young people. So to be transparent, be accessible, be interactive, be together, and be diverse. And then this one I think is really important, and it has been used by so many people since they did this incredible session a couple of years ago in 2020, I think it was, with to kind of overview what to provide with any support with young people, but and that applies to us as grant makers as well as obviously youth work. And then I wanted to leave you with some really helpful resources that they are from the UK, but again, adaptable in any situation. These are things that are partnerships working together, creating toolkits. So there's some incredible resources on all of these. And there's obviously the Lundy model as well, which I'll add to this because it's not actually on there, but the paperwork on the right is a useful checklist from the Lundy model, which helps you to measure your impact. So it's something that I'm going to be looking at. And then finally, this one of our amazing young people, Danny, I'm sure he kind of found his love for poetry, and I always think that this quote is really poignant. The absence of our voices makes no sense. Our voice is power, and we don't mean to cause offence. Our voice is our power. We are tomorrow's leaders, and this is our hour. So I will leave you with that, and hopefully this film.
Youth voice is inspiring.
Development.
Purpose.
Hope.
Trust.
Youth voice
Is transformational.
a lived experience.
Confidence.
Influential.
Youth voice.
Oh,
Youth.
you don't want that again, although it is pretty good. I would do it again. Thank you, everyone. I'm really sorry for the dog interruption. And I hope that was really helpful. And we are now open to any questions and answers that you might have.
Thank you so much, Jo. Thank you so much, Rachel and Tilly as well. This was a very interesting presentation, and I'm sure there are some questions. One question already popped up in the chat, so maybe we can start with that one. It's from Annette from Bertelsmann Stiftung. She wondered, can you give some examples of stakeholders that you reached, that you mentioned during the presentation, Jo?
Yeah, a wide variety. So it's basically any organisations that would think of applying. So they're looking at how to better improve their youth voice work in order to apply, because obviously we've been quite vocal on the fact that youth voice is a priority for us. So a lot of the work, especially that Rachel's team did, was around like what does good quality youth voice look like? So that was organisations delivering, so youth work organisations, but others as well. Like, so if they were, for example, the NHS or local health organisations looking to go into participation work. So there was a wide variety of organisations. But a big one that I've mainly been focused on making sure we influence his funders, because in the UK, again, there's a real mixed kind of mixed bag of organisations on a journey in the funding space, but in the last couple of years it is growing massively, which is fantastic. And so setting up a community of practice within the UK around sharing best practice and what the challenges are we're facing, as well as obviously the successes, is really important, I think. So yeah, a variety of stakeholders. Hopefully that answers.
Thank you, Jo. If anyone has any question, raise your hand. Oh, Annette, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for this inspiring presentation from all three of us, of you. It really resonates in me. I recognize when I think about the way how we work together with young people, especially the report of Tilly and Rachel, which was so emotional, feeling how important it is to listen and to give power to young people. What I'm very interested in is what you mentioned, Jo, the difficulties of measuring the impact. I guess this is a common goal for all of us. And I just was wondering about whether you had already ideas about how we could work together in a network to create a database or good practices, how to measure the impact working together with young persons. Because I believe it's so important to convince more political policymakers to do this and to go this way. So maybe you have already ideas about, and also to use this network to do so.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I'm a big, my two passions are young people and youth voice, but also collaboration. So anything that I think we can do in the power of numbers is so vital, especially now more than ever. I would strongly, I am a bit biased to the Lundy model because there's a community of practice that's been set up. I just find it so adaptable. And one of the resources I'm going to look at as we develop the strategy to go alongside the 2030 strategy is how they have created some tools looking at the impact for the young person, the impact for the organisation, and then the impact for the grant recipients. The grant recipient bit isn't quite as strong in that piece. So I think there's something that we could potentially look at as a network. How do we measure the influence of work like this, the participation, like the difference made by involving young people on the actual grant making? That is the bit that is really tricky, I think. So I put some numbers up there as in, how many more applications we get in that mentions youth voice. But there's something really deeper in the work that Tilly's group did, where they were really shifting the funding officers, so the people, making the decisions, shifting their decisions. So there was one decision that was overturned by a young person because they were like, well, can't we just put in more help and more support? So there's those little moments of where we're shifting whole mindsets. If we can capture something, or if we can work together, or if anyone might be on this call that has an answer to that already, I think that would be great as a collective of us that are doing this in our journey.
Thank you, Jo. And thank you, Annette, for mentioning that. This is a 2-year peer learning journey, and the idea is also that after this peer learning, that we will come out with really a how-to document for foundations to trial out. So, for example, with the recommendations also coming from the module 1, which we had in February, and how to build a youth advisory board, we will really come out with these sort of recommendation on how to. So we'll start trialing this out, and then it's a journey. We'll see how it also evolves with this network. There's already a question in the chat from Anna. You mentioned issues related to remuneration. Did I understand correctly that you pay the participating young people working with you for their work? The idea behind this was that it's a job deserving a payment, or did you see it more as a way to sustain motivation? How do you view the institution rewarding, motivating with money, especially in case of minors or in participation in general?
Yes, that I think whole question just shows the polarity, you know, the differences in everything you need to explore when paying and when remunerating young people. So in past experiences, so in past participation, we didn't pay young people. So when I've done participation in the past, so we remunerated and rewarded them through accreditation, through mentoring, and through different experiences. Oh, Ruby, I'm really sorry. But with this one, we did pay them, and I'm gonna I'll bring Rachel and Tilly in to kind of it's been really on the fence of what attracted young people to the position, and actually I believe on the most part or the majority it wasn't the money actually, but it would be really interesting to bring the young people in. But yes, we did pay them, but we're going to pay them differently going forwards based on some research that's been done around you know, the legal and the effects it has on benefits, etc. But yes, it was payment. But I thought it'd be really interesting maybe if we bring Rachel and Tilly to see, you know, what it was that drove them both.
Yeah, I can go first. Oh, yes. What got me in was absolutely not the money. I didn't even know like I would be getting any remuneration like when I first joined. So it was just out of pure passion for youth work that I joined. But I think in terms of getting remuneration, I completely understand for some people, everybody has different needs about what they want. So some people would prefer money, some people prefer accreditation. So again, it just depends on like personal experience or what they want, you know, to get out of it. But again, it was not like remuneration that drove me to join this. It was just a passion for youth work.
And for me, when I first joined, I didn't realize that we would get paid. I think it's like annually. But what sort of like I'm a person that sort of needs like to know when I'm doing good and what I'm doing good. And those were the things that really helped me. What even though we got paid, which is lovely and absolutely, but it was the growth, like my confidence has grown so much, and I would take that any day over money. The training, the opportunity, the experience that we've gained is much more than we'd get paid. When I went on holidays, the money did help me, but it was there is so much more. I would rather get the experience and all that than get paid. I don't know if I'm making much sense there.
Yeah, no, it's really helpful to have your honesty. Thank you both. And it is important, I think, to note that obviously some young people couldn't get involved unless they were paid. So that's why it is important to have that option. But I must admit, over the course of all of the 20 years of work, it has often been that wraparound package of support, which is the deal breaker for young people. So it's what keeps them engaged or not, or encourages them. The experience is what encourages them in the first instance, I think. But definitely, it is something that we need to definitely needs to be considered about paying, especially for those young people that can't afford to miss their employment or schoolwork, for example, to come.
Thank you.
Yeah, Blagrave has done some great stuff. Thank you, whoever posted that. I was going to pinpoint to that. They've also got a guidance document on there as well, which is really helpful.
Does anyone else have a question? So please feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand. Thank you for sharing the links, Francesca. Annette also posted a comment in the chat, Joe, in regards to the remuneration. So one reason why we pay young experts we're working with is to make it accessible for young people facing financing issues and who have to work during their free time. That's a good point. Thank you. No other questions?
You two must have answered everything.
Exactly. Okay. Unless there is any other questions, I mean, we will of course be uploading this recording, the any resources that came up during this meeting, as well as the key recommendations on the website that I placed in the chat earlier. I can place it once again, where you can already find the link to the module 1, learnings and outcomes. And I see Susanna is here as well. Hello, Susanna, good to see you again. Our module 1 leader as well. Okay, I will place it here. And unless there are any other questions, you can always reach out to me if you have any questions to Joe or or Tilly or Rachel. If you want to have any follow-up that come afterwards, you can email me. And my email is here in the chat as well, if there is any follow-up that's needed.
I
Okay.
just want to say a huge thank you for Rachel and Tilly's time. It's really much appreciated and made it so much better.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Rachel, Tilly, and Joe, for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And the next module will be taking place in June, and the upcoming one after that is in September and November. So keep an eye on your on inboxes for more information that's coming very soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye, and sunny times for everybody.